Hello and welcome to Divorced Women Creating Peace. My screen is just going walkie on me here. Sorry about that. Okay, so welcome to Divorced Women Creating Peace, where we are interviewing women who created peace and joy after their divorce. And I am your host, Velma Gallant. I have an amazing guest to share with you today. Dr. Barnsley Brown is a self-proclaimed steel magnolia in a long line of strong Southern women and taught at Wake Forest University, Duke, and UNC-Chapel Hill before launching Spirited Solutions Professional Speaking and Coaching over 22 years ago. Dr. Barnsley helps big-hearted business owners be unstoppable and more than 10 times their income and impact. Signature programs include the Make It Happen Mastermind group coaching program, the Get Results Now laser coaching program, and transformational Reiki trainings for business owners and professionals. Welcome to the show, Dr. Barnsley.
Thank you, Velma. It's great to be here with you.
So I'm super excited to share your story with our listeners here because as you know, what I love about this is that we give these ladies a vision of what's possible. I don't know about you, but when I was going through my divorce, it felt like that was the only thing going on in my entire world, and I just hurt. And I didn't have a vision for what was possible after my even during my divorce, but let alone after. So my question for you to start this off with is, what was your most valuable lesson from your divorce and what made that so valuable?
Wow, that is such a fascinating question. And, Velma, I really think the most valuable lesson I learned is never to abandon myself again.
Mm.
All right. And I have to say that a lot of times we say, oh, so and so abandoned me, or, I was abandoned when I was a kid, or I was abandoned by this person in this relationship, or whatever it may be. But the
Mhm.
truth of the matter is, as women, we often abandon ourselves. We abandon ourselves. We abandon what we know in our gut feels right and feels acceptable, and what we know in our gut feels icky, right?
Mhm.
But we just don't listen. And I believe when I was in my marriage, and I love him, I will always love him. I have no desire to be married to him. I really have no desire to be married to anyone except myself.
Mhm.
But as women, it's so important that we not let our sense of self be eroded. And I felt like in my marriage, in the last couple of years, it was like, when you go to the beach and you haven't been to the beach in a while, and you say, "Oh my gosh, it's so eroded." But if you go to the beach every day, you never notice the erosion, right?
I
Don't
like
notice,
that.
and then one day you're on there and you're like, "Where am I gonna put my towel here?" And there's the ocean's right there, and that's kind of how it is in a marriage when there's toxicity. You're in it every day, and it's impossible to see that subtle erosion of self that is happening every day.
Mhm. I had goosebumps while you were talking about the lesson that you got of being never to abandon yourself again.
Right.
Like I got full body goosebumps with that one because I agree with you. It is such an important lesson. I know for myself, I remember declaring to God that if you're promising me my marriage, I don't
Mhm.
want it anymore. And I could almost hear audibly, I wasn't promising your marriage, I was promising you. And so
Mm.
that is that giving the gift of getting myself back through the marriage. So I resonate so deeply with what you shared there.
And it is us abandoning ourselves because we could say that person abandoned us, but if we abandon, I think we abandon ourselves first. I really
Mhm.
do. And we do it in a variety of ways, Velma. For example, it might be just settling for some things, for a behavior that we know is a non-negotiable for us.
Mhm.
It could be us settling to be last on that person's list. My ex-husband was a great friend to a lot of people, and he would run off to help them, but if I needed help, I was last, if at all. I had to ask for months and months and months to have even a simple thing that took 10 minutes done. But something like the baby, when we needed the baby latches on the cabinets in the kitchen. And then he looked at me and said, "Well, I don't know why I waited so long when it took him 10 minutes." But the truth is, he'd run out to help all his friends. And I think that's a great quality. But
Mhm.
what's your first priority? Is it your family or is it your friends? And I got very tired of being not a priority in the relationship. And I decided to make myself first priority. And Velma, it's true in business too, not just in divorce
Mhm.
situations, but every relationship. Are we putting ourselves first? Because if we don't put ourselves first, we have nothing to give to anyone else.
It is so interesting because as I'm listening to that, well, what I'm hearing is our experience in the relationships
Mhm.
outside of ourselves are a direct reflection of the relationship that's going on inside of ourselves. So we've abandoned ourselves or we've put ourselves last.
Yes.
That's what's being reflected on the outside in those
Mhm.
relationships as well. We're being abandoned or put last.
I love
Interesting.
that, Velma, because actually there's, Don Miguel Ruiz in the Four Agreements, which is such a great book. If you haven't read it, you've got to get it. It's such a good read. And it doesn't take long to read. It's so powerful. But one thing that he says is no one can ever abuse you more than you abuse yourself. Let me
Mhm.
repeat that. No one can ever abuse you more than you abuse yourself. Because as you point out, what's going to show up in the outer world when we're not putting ourselves first, when we're not loving ourselves and not caring about ourselves and not treating ourselves with honor, well, guess what? There are going to be people who show up who are mirroring that energy and showing us that part of ourselves that gets to be healed, that gets to be brought to the surface and gets to be healed.
I love that. Showing us that part of ourselves. So what if we're looking at the outside and we're
Mhm.
looking at what's going on in our experience, whether that be
Yeah.
our business relationships, our personal relationships, our friendships,
Mhm.
if something's showing up that doesn't feel quite right, taking, it's that, pointing the finger.
Right.
We're pointing the finger, we're observing what's going on there. So how much of that is actually going on inside of us? We
Well,
got the three
they say
fingers
when you're
pointing
pointing
back.
your finger, notice there are three fingers pointing back at you.
Exactly,
you know,
exactly.
And truthfully, I believe that everything is a mirror to our experience, Velma. And sometimes we're going to encounter something that comes up to show us how far we've come, truthfully. So it doesn't have to be that it's there to show us, oh, you're really abandoned yourself or, you whatever. Doesn't have to be that. It can be to show us how much progress we've made. So I'll tell you, I had a situation
Mm,
and I did a Facebook Live yesterday about it, Velma, and I really got a kick out of doing the Facebook Live. Although if I had had this situation 10 years ago, I would have been distraught. Really, I would have. It was a situation with a mentor of mine, a seven-figure mentor, and I basically was chided because in the conferences that are held by this organization, I like to share information. I like to be in the chat and say, "Oh, please share that." I like to comment.
mhm,
And they don't want anyone commenting. It's like this territorial thing, and don't want anyone connecting. It's like you can't give your email. You can't. It's very strange. So I received this email, Velma, saying, we'd love for you to continue. This would have been my 3rd year. We'd love for you to continue. Here's what has gone on the last couple of times. And I was thinking, I never give people my email because I hate email. But anyway, who knows? I do. I hate email. So if anything, I would have given them my cell phone, just saying, because I'm not an email person. I don't enjoy it. I think it's a waste of time. And I read this through, and Velma, I sat there and I said, you know what? It took me less than a minute. And I said, they said either, you can agree. It was very nicely worded, or we'll be happy to give you a full refund. And I didn't take, I took less than a minute and I sent a thing back and said, I'll accept the full refund. Thank you so much. And you can go ahead and put it on the cards that I used before and just send me a receipt here. And I let it go onwards. I didn't give an explanation. I didn't try to
Mm.
justify my position. There was no attachment to it. And I saw in that moment, and then I did the Facebook Live and I'm laughing. And in that moment, I'm like, do not ever let someone suppress your voice. And you're here to
Mm.
share. And if someone can't deal with you sharing what is your purpose and your mission, and if there's this feeling of this territory, if you're getting anything like that in business, get the hell out, you know, get the hell out and don't stop, you know, and be relieved. Be relieved. And truthfully, I had felt earlier that this was not my tribe, Velma. I really had started
Mhm.
to feel that very intensely because I make money and I make a lot of money, and a lot of people in this program are not making any money. And they're not, which is not about money. It's about, are you doing your purpose on the planet? Right? Are you
Right.
serious and committed to it? And I have been for 22 years, and there's no sugar daddy here. This is my livelihood. And this is why I've been put here on the earth to do what I do as a coach, as a Reiki trainer, as the mastermind, make it happen mastermind facilitator. I'm here for that, right? And this is how I make my livelihood, and a good, handsome livelihood. And so I just felt that this was not the group for me. It really started to feel incongruous, right? And so I was relieved when this happened because it was like, oh, I can get my money back. But I saw in that moment that I was not willing to put myself into an uncomfortable position, or a position where I felt disempowered to truly be
Mhm.
myself.
I love that. I love that. And when you were talking about explaining, and you didn't feel like explaining and justifying yourself. And
Mhm.
I love how you also made the comment about um the reflection showing us how far we come. Because as I'm
Exactly.
listening to that, inside of my relationships, how many times did I explain and justify myself? How many times did I explain and justify myself to myself?
Mhm. Which is like apologizing to ourselves for being us.
Oh, that's good.
Think about it. And are we really going to apologize? And the truth of the matter is that some people don't like me, and some people
Mhm.
don't like you, Velma. And some people don't like the people who are listening. Guess what? They're people who don't like you. And then there are people who really do love you and resonate with you. And I choose to be with those people who really resonate with me. I don't
Mhm.
choose to give my energy to the people who don't get me, don't get my sometimes very loudness. Sometimes I can be obnoxious. I'm high energy. I'm a know-it-all. Sometimes I can be a smartass. I'm funny. I'm goofy and funny, and I have a big, big heart. And if someone can't see that big, big heart and can't appreciate the way that I show up in the world with love and really wanting people to have what they say that they want, if someone
Mhm.
can't appreciate that, well, then that someone is not for me to be around.
Well, and the reality is, look, there's a couple of sayings out there I love. You can't make everyone happy. You're not bacon. And
Mm-mm.
I know the vegetarians are going to get upset with me about that one, but I love bacon. But there's also I saw it the other day on Facebook, and it was a meme that was saying about you're intimidating. And the response from this friend was, is she intimidating or are you intimidated?
Yes.
And I loved that flip on it because it really was
That's
about what was
wonderful.
going on for them. It had absolutely nothing to do with this other person.
And see, that's the thing. I have been told I'm intimidating, and I just laugh at that. And actually, one time when someone told me that, it was in the context of a women's group, a women's business networking group. And this person evidently, I'm very enthusiastic and I'm also very direct. And it was the new business owner, and I really felt like I could help her. And so I said, hey, I really think I can help you. Why don't we have a complimentary session and explore it? And so the feedback was, oh, well, she's not coming back because she felt like you were really intimidating. And I guess the idea was pressuring or something like that.
Mm,
I just when I was told this, I just really at first I was like, "Really?" And then I let it hit in my heart, Velma, and I started to feel such compassion. And I'll tell you, my eyes just filled with tears. And I said, I am feeling so sad right now, and I'll tell you why. Because I'm thinking about that person who felt so small that she would be intimidated by me.
mhm.
That is sad to me. And
Yeah.
I hope that you convey that to her. I hope that you tell her that I cry for her feeling that small and saying she's not going to come back to something that could support her in her business because of that.
Well, especially considering she may have felt small, but the fact that you had the invitation there was you saw how big she was.
Yeah. Yes. And so, Vilma, I think that, as you point out, it's really never, ever about us. It's about where that person is coming from.
Mhm.
And we just happen to show up in a place and we remind them of someone maybe who was abusive or who wasn't, you know, whatever, who treated them poorly. Um, and maybe they're coming from a lot of distrust. We never know. We
Mhm.
never know. However, I'm very clear that it does no one any good for us to dim our light to make them comfortable.
Exactly. Exactly. And what I'm hearing there is, one, it's really important to see that what's going on outside of us is a reflection of what's going on inside of us, but to also understand that sometimes we're the mirror for them too.
Right.
So it ends up being that continuous reflection
Mhm,
back and forth. And so it really does come down to, what part of the reflection am I choosing to own? And what part of the reflection am I choosing is not mine? What's of value for me to learn from in this experience?
mhm.
And what's of value for me to just put down?
Right. And to thine own self be true in it all, you know, to
Hmm.
our own GPS, our own navigational system, our own inner guidance. We've
Yeah.
got to be true to that. And
Hmm.
I'm sure that you've had plenty of opportunities in life where you took a stand about something and it might have been unpopular with a number of people, because when we take a stand, right, when we actually commit to something and take a stand, we're going to be defining something in contradistinction to something else, and so somebody's going to get pissed off, right?
Absolutely.
Well,
Well, and
somebody.
that is what occurred inside of my marriage, is
Yes.
because who I was presenting in the early days of
Yeah.
our marriage, and I started growing into who I am.
Right.
That was pretty hard for him to accept, because from his perspective was, I wasn't the woman that he married. And
Right.
in a lot of ways it was the truth.
Yes, because 'cause you'd grown, and I think that is the thing about marriage, is that, perhaps in many ways it's an outdated institution, because these days, just look at how technology changes.
Mm.
Technology changes all the time. I mean, it doesn't stay the same from in 24 hours. And our lives are continually evolving and changing with the impact of technology. And we're so connected throughout the whole world because of it. And we have so much more on our plates than we did ever before, and so much more that we're exposed to. So the opportunity for individual growth is huge. And to think that two people could actually grow exactly along a sort of, trajectory together for their whole life, for 50 years or 60 years or even 20 years, I think is has almost become obsolete.
Well, I think it's a really important awareness because I mean, we are always at choice.
Yeah.
We are always at choice. And so do our have we partnered with someone who has similar values to us and is making the
Yes.
same choices? Are we willing to shift things? Where are we willing to shift things? And so it really does become a dance, and it can either be a beautiful dance where we dance kind of together,
Yeah.
sort of,
Or not.
or is it better for us to head other directions? I mean, I know
Mm.
that for me, I'm happier where I'm at now because I've made choices for myself. And actually, with both marriages, each time I was making choices for myself.
Mhm. Well, what you said made me think about when my ex-husband proposed. I said to him, "Yes, and that is with the agreement that we go to church together." And this was, by the way, was not like a Baptist church or some very, it's an
Mhm,
interfaith church. And literally in my church, there are people who are everything. Like you could be a Buddhist in this church, you could, whatever. But the
mhm,
idea was for us to have a shared faith and to raise our daughter in the church, right? In
mhm,
that spiritual community. Really, spiritual community is a better way to put it. We don't really call ourselves a church. Actually, we call ourselves the Center for Peace, Unity Center of Peace. And he agreed. And I wasn't even asking every Sunday. I said a couple of times a month because he loved soccer and soccer was on Sunday. So I wasn't going to take that away from him, but I
mhm,
wanted us to go a couple of times a month together and have that shared value system. And it didn't happen. And Velma, I shared that with my daughter because there were some things that people were spreading. His daughter from his first marriage was saying, "Oh, well, he just married me for papers and blah blah blah." And the truth is, papers were not possible when he married me. That was not even an issue at all. He was originally from Peru, but there was no possibility of papers at that time. And eventually we were able to get his papers. But when we got married out of love. It was love. And I told my daughter, and I said, and here's the thing, let me just share this, and when you make that kind of agreement and then someone doesn't keep it, and values and faith would be the foundation that helps really keep a family going and together
mhm.
and provides a support system and a community that helps that couple stay together as well and that family stay together. Well, when that didn't happen, it became really untenable. And the funny thing was she was talking to her boyfriend, and I had told her this so long ago. And she said, we were talking about she's going to the Catholic Church right now, which is fine. I'm not Catholic, but I'm glad she wants to go. She's going and learning things like the Nicene Creed. And I learned those when I was 13 or 14 in the Presbyterian Church, the Apostles' Creed, blah, blah, blah. And she enjoys it. And she goes every week.
Mhm.
I'm happy she enjoys it. And we don't go to the Catholic Church, but she likes to go to the youth thing. And she's going to get, I guess, baptized there. But what we were talking about, was the importance of spirituality. In the middle of this conversation, she started explaining to her boyfriend about what I had told her, that I asked him to go with me, and it didn't happen. And that caused a lot of stress in the relationship. And it was interesting because I think what I said was not blaming. It wasn't
No.
a blaming thing. It was just we were different. We were mismatched in our values and what was at the core of who we were. And though when I spoke in churches, Velma, he would come, he even videotaped me. Sometimes he would come early on. You
Mhm.
know, I think there was always a piece of him that when I did one of my outrageous Barnsley things, it was like, you know, this judgment that happened. I'm serious. I remember my first stand-up comedy and we had to perform. There were just 2 women who ended up in the it was a big class, but only 2 women made it through and I was one of them. And we had to perform in this bar for a big audience and a comedy club basically. And I remember, you know, performing and I think he laughed, but his friends definitely laughed more than he laughed. He was kind of like, "Oh," you know. So I always felt that he was somewhat embarrassed by me and my outrageousness, and that's the worst feeling in the world. The worst feeling in the world.
It is interesting because when I look back for myself, I had made choices where it's not quite me, but I love him, so I'll do it. And then
Mhm.
eventually I would fall back into me. And so
Right.
that what I hear is, well, it's not quite me, but I love her. So I'll do
Mhm.
it. And then he fell back into himself.
Right.
So really, can we fault people for that, or do we accept people for that?
Yeah, I mean, it just was not it was just not meant to be, and I never felt like the family was a priority and I was a priority. The friends were always the priority, and I couldn't compete with that. You know, the
Mhm.
friends and parties and all of this were the priority, and I couldn't compete and didn't want to compete with that.
Agreed. And I think too, sometimes the purpose of a relationship isn't always what we hoped it would be. Because I know when I look back at my second marriage, um, I got my son out of that.
Exactly. I
And
don't
it
regret anything because my daughter came out of this.
if that was the sole purpose of that experience, I'll take it. I'll take it every
Listen,
time.
and I traveled in Peru, and I absolutely adore my mother-in-law, I love her sisters, and, you know, they still love me very much. I see her every time she comes to the States, and my sister-in-law, Anita, they're wonderful. I love them. And, you know, it was funny because, well, there was a moment, and it was just me and my daughter who had gone to Peru because at that time he couldn't travel with his status. And this was when I was like she was 1.5 years old. And I traveled with her alone and took all these suitcases of stuff to people. But I was looking through photos with my mother-in-law, and she had cut out of the picture his his first wife, right? Who he was divorced from. And it was
Mhm.
so obvious. You could see like the picture had this both sides, but you could see that the chandelier was suddenly shrunk down to like here because the middle part that had her in it was gone.
Mhm.
And I saw that and I was like, Mama Olga, I hope you don't cut me out of the pictures if something happens. And I said, and I may be divorced, you know, if I divorce your son, I'm not divorcing this family, you know?
Yeah.
But it
Yeah.
does end up that it is hard. That was one of the hardest things actually. But I have to say a few years ago, I spent Christmas at my ex's house and all the family, his side of the family was there. And I enjoyed myself. It was great to see them. So
We get to
healing
choose
happened.
our experience. In the end, we get to choose. Sometimes it feels like we're not a choice, but we really are.
We're at choice and truthfully, you know, when we separated, there was a period where I really hoped some things might change and that
Mhm.
we would be able to get back together. But it was very clear it wasn't going to happen. And he had planned to move back in. And interestingly, and you know, I have no remorse about this because I had met someone who I was communicating with, and we went on 2 dates, dinner dates, and that was it. Because he lived out of town and he ended up moving to California. But the thing that happened was this communication that we had, and it was really rich. And he was also separated, and we were talking about, well, how do you let go of somebody you love? Anyway, my ex-husband went into my account. He went into my Facebook and found this conversation, which I had not erased. And it was flirty. It was a flirty conversation, but he made a lot of assumptions that were incorrect.
Mhm.
And he decided that his way of seeing things was correct, that I had cheated on him and blah, blah, blah. And the fact of the matter is, we were separated. I went on 2 dates, you know, did
Yeah.
not have a physical relationship with this person other than the exchange of a couple of kisses. That was it. But I had cheated. And so he found that the day that he had planned to move back in. But truthfully, Velma, I was so happy he found this. This sounds awful, but I was happy he found it because I did not want him moving back in. Really. And
Yes.
when I realized that, and I'm being honest with everyone here because maybe it'll make a difference for somebody listening. When I realized and got really honest with myself, that I
Mhm.
felt relieved that he had jumped to all sorts of conclusions. I felt relieved that he had gone into my private Facebook stuff. I felt relieved because I didn't want him to move back in. And so isn't it interesting that the universe orchestrated all of that to support me?
To support you to not
Yes,
abandon yourself again.
exactly. And it is really hard for those who are recently separated. It's heart-wrenching. It's so hard. And there's always going to be love there for that person, right? We're always going to have a part of our heart with them, especially when we share children.
Yes.
If he were in the hospital, I would definitely go to see him. You know, it there's always love there. And I had to remind myself, and I actually did some meditations where what I did is I saw myself in a train station, Velma, and I saw myself putting into a locker the good memories, just putting them into a locker at the train station, like baggage that you leave,
Yeah.
and then locking it up and leaving it there to be picked up in another lifetime, perhaps.
Yeah. Yeah. It is so interesting. You've shared so many very valuable lessons that you gained from the experience of the ending of your marriage. I really do. Again, never to abandon yourself, never to let your sense of self be eroded.
Yes.
The reflective aspects of what we discussed, explaining and justifying. There was so much juicy stuff in there. I really want to thank you for your time and for speaking so candidly about your experience. I want to make sure that our listeners know how to connect with you. I know you're on a variety of social media platforms,
Mhm.
and in the comment section of this audio or video, there is information on how to connect with Dr. Barnsley. And I'm going to put up her website here, spirited-solutions.com. And I believe you do have a special gift there for people when they
I
pop by the
do.
website.
I do. There is an ebook, a complimentary ebook that you can get at the website. Make sure you put that hyphen so you pull up the right website. And it is on how to overcome overwhelm in 7 easy steps. And when you sign up for that, you will also get some opportunities in your email box, maybe once a month, not very frequently, but some opportunities. For example, I had a Reiki event earlier online, a Reiki healing event, which is wonderful when you're going through a transition like divorce.
Mm-hmm.
And so you'll receive invitations to many events, a lot of which are free. So I hope you will connect there. My role in life is really to see that women that we have, like you say, peace. And you and I have the same logo, by the way, Velma, the dove of peace. Our logo is just the same, my dear. You got to look at my website, you'll see. My role is to really support women that we can be free financially and otherwise so that we never stay in an untenable situation,
Mm-hmm.
so that we are always able, whether it's a job or a friendship or a marriage or a love relationship, we're always able to get up and go and take care of ourselves and our children.
I love that. I
Yeah.
love that. Thanks again for coming and joining me today and sharing your story. I truly appreciate it.
I appreciate you, Velma. You have a big heart, and I've really enjoyed our interview.
And for those of you out there, be sure to stay tuned. We're going to have more amazing ladies that will be sharing with you. And make sure you go listen to our past shows. And definitely like, subscribe, and leave a comment. What's the value that you received from our interview today? Thanks, and have a brilliant day.